How do you recover from mistakes on the drums? You're playing along, you decide to go for something, then what are you supposed to do? Well, today I'm going to share 4 quick tips you can practice to help you recover better. Because let's bring it in for a sec. There's nothing more frustrating than playing along in a groove, afraid to take a risk because you're worried things will go off the rails. The more confidence you build that if you go for something and don't nail it, ain't no thing, the less worried you'll be to try stuff. I'm Nate, and this is the 80/20 Drummer, and let's get to it. And folks, we're going to share a number of beats and licks with you throughout this lesson. If you'd like a completely free transcription of those, just click the link below the player and tell us where to send it on the next page. And now, on with the lesson. Let's first talk about what we want to avoid. Yes, it would be good to avoid having to stop, though, as I'll explain later, even that can be a decent strategy. What we really want to avoid is this feeling of, I messed up, which then makes you self-conscious. Anything short of that, including some of these things we'll talk about, and even stopping, can work fine, as long as you do it assertively. An example or two from my growing swipe file of great drummers, losing it a little after going for something, only to own it and continue with confidence. Last detail before we get into the strategies. Let's talk about what we mean by mistakes, though as we'll see, mistakes are only mistakes if we let them be. The first is just something happening in physical space that interferes with your plans. Say you go to hit a cymbal and miss. Or go to hit a tom and hit a rim instead. Or drive the beat of the stick squarely into the shell of your rack tom as you reach for it. Or try to hit a kick double and only one of the intended notes actually happens. So that's one category. The other is your mental. Like when you're playing along and the buffering runs out and you just glitch, which is like your hands catching up with your brain and not knowing where to go next. These are both kind of related since you're more likely to miss a drummer cymbal if you're doing something at the last minute. My point is to say these strategies will all help with these kinds of glitches. Ready for the strategies? Here goes. Tip 1. Have a safe haven. A safe haven just refers to something you can retreat to instead of stopping completely, which I'll emphasize again, isn't even all that bad. Let me show you 2 quick ones I like for fills. This is number 1. This is number 2. I'll first quickly cover how this helps you in a gig or solo situation, then we'll talk about how to practice it. Let's say I'm filling around, and I hit a snag or glitch. If I have that safe haven really ingrained, I can always retreat back there. If it's an idea glitch, I can return to one of these ideas while I think of the next thing. And if it's a physical glitch like stepping my rack tom, no biggie. Just pick up the safe haven lick already in progress. Okay, but that means you need these pretty well ingrained, right? So here's how we practice. Set a metronome for a comfortable tempo that's not too fast or slow, and just start with one of the safe haven licks. You can start with mine, but you can also create your own. Just a shape you like to play that you can find your way back to. We're going to repeat it, orchestrate it, just get used to it. Then we're just going to improvise something else really quick, then come back to it. Quick little variation, then back to the safe haven lick. The more comfortable I can get, the longer I'll improvise before returning. Do this 20 minutes a day for a couple weeks, and you'll have some well-ingrained safe haven licks you can return to. One quick footnote on a specific and very common reason people mess up. If you're doing combos across the bar line and end up in a repetitive accent pattern on a weird part of the beat, like this. Playing a group of 3 notes, like right-left kick, will almost always get you back to a downbeat, or at least an 8th offbeat. That's just an aside. Okay, onward. Tip 2. Own the mistake. You've probably heard players like Miles Davis talk about taking a wrong note and making it right. I love this line in a Kurt Rosenwinkel solo, where he hits an unintended note, then doubles back to incorporate that into the solo. Here's Dan Mayo speaking recently on JP Bouvet's channel about the same thing.
Now, I'm repeating a mistake that I did because my stick got stuck in the floor tom.
What this looks like in reality is if I'm taking a risk and accidentally glitch or play something I didn't intend, I'll just lean into it and play it again. Until we get to the next tip, you kind of have to practice this opportunistically. But you can start with that safe haven exercise from before and just take more and more risk. And the first time you play something you didn't intend, try to isolate and loop that thing. Then do theme and variations on it. Of course, this is only one way to incorporate a mistake, but it's important to give yourself something to practice in the shed, so you're not just trying to remember, own my mistakes on a gig. Because on a gig, you don't want to be thinking consciously about anything. Which brings us to tip 3, kind of an extension of tip 2. Tip 3, practice messing up. 2 years ago, I made a video about how when you look for it, there really is no messing up on the drums. In gymnastics, you have a balance beam where there's a clear failure mode. You fall off and bad things. But also, there's a competition where the more daring stuff you do on the balance beam and still land it, the better. There's only sincere or not, boring or not, musical or not. The primary point of that video was to think of screwing up as something to look for, to root out, rather than to be afraid of. And because I know there are other teachers that watch this channel, I want to make sure I add some context. This is not the same as recommending you practice things sloppily or practice things too quick before you're ready. In general, when you're learning to play something for the first time, you want to play it in a context where around 90% of your reps are correct. Whether that means keeping it simple or keeping the tempo slow or keeping the scope of vocabulary small. But in one very specific circumstance, which is exploring our psychology, I advocate for the opposite. Practice messing up. Practice going to your limit just so you can see that if you do mess up, nothing terrible is going to happen. This is akin to looking under the bed for the monster. But examples. After a long session of structured improvised practice, I'll try intentionally to introduce a little chaos, then see what happens. If I succeed, I'll just recover. But many students also discover that when they try to mess up, they find it difficult. Of course, this depends on how advanced you are, but you might find the same thing, which sets up a positive feedback loop of continually trying to fail and failing to fail, which can be a great confidence boost. Which brings us to the final, most woo-woo of all of these. Tip 4. Realize people don't want perfect. As I said before, there's only boring and not boring, musical and not musical. And in real life, all else being equal, people seem overwhelmingly to prefer art that takes risks to art that's perfect. Case in point, when I used to do the videos where I'd learn a set of difficult music in just a few days, very often the first take of the song, after just minimal practice, was among the best. Then I'd listen back and take note of all the errors, and my next umpteen takes would be careful. Very often the final take of the video would be mostly free from errors, but more boring than the first take. Only months later, with the song fully ingrained, would it be fun to listen to again. What's going on here? Well, probably in the first take, I didn't have much pressure because I didn't have any expectation of the take being error-free. So I was just going for it. With subsequent takes, I was having to pay attention to more and more little details, and the pressure was higher. And in case you think I'm saying don't learn any songs because it ruins spontaneity, I'm not. It's more like, ideally, we want to be mostly error-free and spontaneous. Especially in those situations where your band members have taken the time to write a song, and they'd prefer a mostly faithful rendition. But in many cases, it's worse to be boring than to make a few errors. Apply that to the average situation my students are in, which is playing a song they've rehearsed for months with their band. So they already have the songs pretty well in hand. In that situation, the only real danger is being boring. And as I said a couple years ago, my first videos for Meinl were the first situation since I started retrofitting my playing in 2014, in which I went into a relatively high-stakes situation and thought I performed well. And the major thought in my head, don't be boring. So, postscript. Why are we talking all this psychology? Because a large percentage of mistakes are in your head. An audience either won't notice the error, or as long as you keep going and it's not boring, won't care. But if you let it get to you and start getting self-conscious, that's when it gets awkward. But it's not because you messed up, it's because you let the mistake get to you and started getting self-conscious, which produced a performance that became boring. So yes, use the first 3 strategies to get back on if you make a mistake. But use tip 4 to realize the only bad reaction is letting it get to you. So stop and stick out your tongue. Exclaim loudly, "I messed up!" and try to get a laugh from the audience. Don't do this in a song with a band, but get up from the drums, say "I quit," and pretend to storm out of the room. Then shrug, say JK, and keep playing. And once you know nothing bad will happen, it'll be easier to let those little things you didn't plan go, and nobody's the wiser.
And that's how you get the gig!
Welp, Hope everybody enjoyed this one. As usual, we'll probably have a little controversy. Let's play it out in the comments. Be polite. And just a reminder, if you'd like a free transcription of all of the methods in this video, just click the link below the player and tell us where to send it. Dudes, it's been real. Always enjoy these. See you again real soon in another lesson of the week. Unfortunately, I can't seem to fuck up.